Introduction. A stormy night of secrets. The wind howled outside as rain lashed against the windows of the quaint suburban home. 7-year-old Mia sat curled up on the living room couch, her tiny frame wrapped in a threadbare blanket. In her arms was Teddy, her most prized possession, a worn stuffed bear that had been her companion through the toughest days. She stared at the clock on the wall, its steady ticking the only sound breaking the eerie silence inside the house. The babysitter, Karen, stood across the room, her shadow stretching ominously under the dim light. Karen's sharp eyes fixated on Mia, her lips curling into a cold, twisted smirk. "Stop slouching like that," Karen barked, her voice slicing through the stillness. "Do you think I'm here to coddle you?" Mia flinched, clutching Teddy tighter. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Karen stepped closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Sorry doesn't fix anything, you little brat," she snapped. She yanked the blanket away from Mia, leaving the child shivering in the chilly air. "You don't deserve that stupid bear. Hand it over." Mia's eyes welled with tears as she held Teddy even closer. "Please don't take him. He's all I have." Karen's laughter echoed, cold and unfeeling. "All you have? Pathetic." She snatched the bear from Mia's arms and tossed it across the room. Mia's sobs filled the space, but Karen was unmoved. "Stop crying," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're lucky I'm even watching you. Ungrateful little thing." Unbeknownst to Karen, her actions were not entirely unseen. Outside, hidden in the shadows of a neighboring house, a figure watched. A faint glow of a cell phone screen illuminated their face as they captured the confrontation through the window. The background. A desperate mother's gamble. 2 weeks earlier, Clara, Mia's mother, had been faced with an impossible choice. A hard-working single mom, Clara juggled 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Her days were long, starting before sunrise and stretching late into the night. Despite her exhaustion, her greatest joy was coming home to Mia's sweet, smiling face. But Clara's latest promotion came with a heavy price, longer hours that would keep her away from home even more. She needed help. The neighbors had recommended Karen, a woman in her early 40s who had a reputation for being strict but dependable. "She'll whip your kid into shape," one neighbor had said with a laugh. Clara hesitated. Mia was a sensitive child, kind and gentle. She wasn't sure how well her daughter would handle strict discipline. But with no family nearby and few options within her limited budget, Clara reluctantly hired Karen. The first week seemed uneventful. Mia didn't say much about Karen, and Clara didn't push. "How's Karen treating you?" she asked one night while tucking Mia into bed. "She's okay," Mia had replied softly, her eyes darting to the side. Clara chalked it up to nerves and promised herself to keep an eye on things. But as her work hours grew longer, she noticed changes in Mia. Her once vivid drawings now seemed darker, with jagged lines and sad faces. When Clara asked about them, Mia just shrugged and said she missed her. Rising tension. The mask begins to slip. Karen's facade of professionalism slowly crumbled when Clara wasn't around. Mia, eager to please, tried to follow all of Karen's rules, but no matter what she did, it was never enough. "Why didn't you finish your dinner?" Karen demanded one evening, standing over Mia at the kitchen table. "I wasn't hungry," Mia said, her voice trembling. "Ungrateful," Karen muttered under her breath. "You think food just appears out of nowhere. Go to bed hungry then." That night, Mia lay awake, her stomach growling and tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered to Teddy, "Mommy will come home soon. She'll make everything better." Karen's punishments escalated with each passing day. She forced Mia to scrub the floors, took away her toys, and yelled at her for the smallest mistakes. Karen ensured that all evidence of her cruelty disappeared before Clara returned, presenting herself as a no-nonsense caregiver who was firm but fair. But Mia's spirit was beginning to break. She no longer smiled when Clara came home. Her once bubbly chatter was replaced by silence. One day, as Clara was leaving for work, Maya clung to her leg. "Please don't go," she begged, her voice desperate. Clara knelt down and kissed Mia's forehead. "I have to, sweetheart. Karen will take good care of you." Mia's eyes darted to Karen, who stood by the door with her arms crossed, her expression icy. "Okay, Mommy," Maya said softly, stepping back. A neighbor's suspicion. Unbeknownst to Karen, her actions had not gone entirely unnoticed. Mrs. Delgado, an elderly woman who lived next door, had seen and heard enough to raise her suspicions. From her window, Mrs. Delgado often saw Mia sitting alone on the porch, her head bowed and her hands clutching Teddy. Karen, on the other hand, spent her time barking orders or scrolling through her phone. One afternoon, Mrs. Delgado decided to approach Mia. "Hello, sweetheart," she said gently. "Where's your mommy?" "At work," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And Karen?" "Inside," Maya said, glancing nervously at the house. Mrs. Delgado frowned. She knew something wasn't right. That evening, she positioned herself by her window, her phone in hand. When she saw Karen snatch Teddy from Mia and toss it across the room, she pressed record. The storm breaks. The rainy night when Karen snatched Teddy marked the breaking point. Mia's cries of despair echoed through the house as Karen locked her in the basement to teach her a lesson. Upstairs, Karen smirked, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Little brats like her need to learn the hard way," she muttered. But just as she settled into the couch, a loud knock echoed through the house. Karen frowned, annoyed at the interruption. She opened the door to find Mrs. Delgado standing there, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Can I help you?" Karen asked, her tone sharp. "I'd like to speak to Clara," Mrs. Delgado said firmly. "She's not here," Karen replied, beginning to close the door. Mrs. Delgado's foot shot out, stopping it. "Then perhaps the police would like to see what I've recorded tonight," she said, her voice steady. Karen's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mrs. Delgado raised her phone, showing the video of Karen's treatment of Mia. "This is what I'm talking about. Now, either you get Clara on the phone, or I'm calling the authorities." Mrs. Delgado takes a stand. The rain hammered against the windows as Mrs. Delgado stood on the porch, her stance firm and unyielding. Karen's face, usually painted with smug confidence, was now pale with unease. The elderly neighbor held up her phone, the glow from the screen illuminating her sharp, determined expression. "You can try to deny it," Mrs. Delgado said, her voice unwavering. "But I've seen enough. That little girl deserves better. And if you think I'll stand by and do nothing, you're sorely mistaken." Karen forced a tight smile, masking her growing panic. "You're misunderstanding the situation," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Mia is a difficult child, and sometimes she needs firm discipline. That's all." Mrs. Delgado narrowed her eyes. "Discipline? Locking her in the basement, snatching her belongings. That's not discipline. It's cruelty." Before Karen could respond, Mrs. Delgado reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. "I've already contacted Clara," she said. "She's on her way." Clara learns the truth. Across town, Clara was midway through her shift when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking as she saw Mrs. Delgado's name. The elderly woman rarely called, and the timing made Clara uneasy. She stepped into the break room and answered, "Mrs. Delgado, is everything okay?" "No, Clara, everything is not okay," Mrs. Delgado said firmly. "You need to come home immediately. It's about Mia." Clara's stomach tightened. "What happened? Is she hurt?" "She's physically fine, but you need to see what I've recorded. Your babysitter, Karen, isn't who you think she is." The urgency in Mrs. Delgado's voice sent a chill through Clara. Without hesitation, she grabbed her belongings and told her manager she had a family emergency. The confrontation, Clara arrived home to find Mrs. Delgado waiting on the porch, her umbrella shielding her from the relentless rain. Karen was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Mia?" Clara demanded, her voice trembling. "In the basement," Mrs. Delgado said, her voice tinged with anger. Karen locked her down there. Clara's face turned pale. She rushed into the house, her shoes squeaking against the wet floor. She found the basement door bolted shut and fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking. "Mia, sweetheart, it's Mommy," she called. A faint, tearful voice replied, "Mommy." Clara managed to open the door and descended the stairs, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter huddled in a corner, clutching Teddy. Mia's tear-streaked face lit up when she saw her mother, and she ran into Clara's arms. "I'm so sorry, baby," Clara whispered, holding her tightly. Upstairs, Karen reappeared, her expression indignant. "Clara, I can explain." "Explain." Clara's voice was sharp, her anger boiling over. "You locked my daughter in a basement. You think there's an explanation for that?" Karen's eyes darted to Mrs. Delgado, who stood in the doorway, her phone still recording. "This is a misunderstanding," Karen stammered. "Mia was misbehaving, and I—" "Save it," Clara interrupted. "You're leaving. Now. The police get involved." Karen huffed, grabbing her coat and heading for the door. But before she could leave, Clara stopped her. "Not so fast," she said, pulling out her phone. "You think you can just walk away after what you've done? I'm calling the police." Karen's confident facade crumbled. "Police? That's not necessary." "Oh, it's very necessary," Mrs. Delgado interjected. "You've hurt this child, and you need to answer for it." Within minutes, the police arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the quiet street. Karen tried to maintain her composure as the officers questioned Clara and Mrs. Delgado. "Do you have evidence of the abuse?" one officer asked. Mrs. Delgado handed over her phone. "I recorded her actions tonight. That poor child has been living in fear." The officer reviewed the footage, his expression hardening. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." Karen protested, her voice rising in desperation. "This is a mistake. I was only trying to help." The officer cut her off. "You can explain that downtown." As Karen was escorted to the squad car, Mia clung to Clara, her small frame trembling. "Is she gone, Mommy?" "She's gone, sweetheart," Clara said softly, kissing the top of Mia's head. "She won't hurt you again." The fallout. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Clara and Mia. Clara struggled with guilt, berating herself for not noticing the signs sooner. She spent hours talking to Mia, reassuring her that she was safe and loved. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you," Clara said one evening as they sat on the couch. "It's not your fault, Mommy," Maya replied, her voice small but steady. "You didn't know." Mrs. Delgado became a constant presence in their lives, bringing meals and helping Clara navigate the legal process. "You're not alone in this," she said firmly. "We'll get through it together." Meanwhile, the news of Karen's arrest spread through the neighborhood. Other families came forward, sharing their own unsettling experiences with her. It became clear that Karen had a history of manipulative and abusive behavior, hidden behind a veneer of professionalism. A glimmer of hope. Despite the darkness of recent events, moments of light began to emerge. Clara found a new babysitter through a trusted community group, someone warm and kind who immediately bonded with Mia. The little girl slowly began to heal, her laughter returning bit by bit. One afternoon, Clara came home to find Mia sitting at the kitchen table, drawing a picture. It was a bright, colorful scene of a sunny day, with a smiling figure holding hands with a little girl. "Who's that?" Clara asked, pointing to the smiling figure. "It's Mrs. Delgado," Maya said with a shy smile. "She's our hero." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "She is, isn't she?" Reflection and gratitude. Clara and Mrs. Delgado sat together one evening, reflecting on everything that had happened. I'll never be able to thank you enough, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Delgado replied. I just did what any decent person would do. Clara shook her head. Not everyone would have stepped in like you did. You saved my daughter. Mrs. Delgado smiled gently. Mia is a special girl. She has a bright future ahead of her, and I'm glad I could help her see it. Justice in motion. The aftermath of Karen's arrest sent ripples through the neighborhood, turning what was once a quiet community into a flurry of whispers and speculation. Clara, determined to protect Mia and ensure Karen faced the consequences of her actions, found herself navigating an unfamiliar world of police reports, legal procedures, and emotional healing. But even as Clara tried to focus on moving forward, questions about Karen's past haunted her. Who was this woman, and how had she managed to deceive so many people for so long? A deeper investigation. A few days after Karen's arrest, Clara received a call from Officer Martinez, the lead investigator on the case. His tone was calm but firm as he explained the next steps. Ms. Harper, we've been reviewing the evidence and speaking with other families, he said. It seems Karen has a history of complaints filed against her, though none led to charges. Clara's grip tightened on the phone. How is that possible? She shouldn't have been allowed to work with children. It's frustrating, I know, Martins replied. Most of the complaints were dismissed due to lack of evidence or settled quietly. But your case is different. Mrs. Delgado's video and your daughter's testimony give us a strong foundation. Clara felt a surge of determination. What can I do to help? Stay involved, Martins said. We'll need you to testify, and it's important Mia feels safe enough to share her side of the story. As Clara hung up, she resolved to do whatever it took to hold Karen accountable, not just for Mia, but for any other children she may have harmed. The courtroom drama. Weeks later, the case went to court. The small courtroom was packed with community members who had heard about Karen's arrest. Clara sat in the front row, holding Mia's hand. Mrs. Delgado was by their side, her presence a steady source of comfort. Karen entered the courtroom in handcuffs, her usually haughty demeanor replaced by a nervous, subdued expression. The prosecutor began by presenting Mrs. Delgado's video footage, which played on a large screen for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room as Karen's harsh treatment of Mia unfolded before their eyes. This video shows just a fraction of what Mia endured, the prosecutor said, but it's enough to reveal the defendant's true nature. When Clara took the stand, her voice trembled but didn't waver as she recounted the signs she had missed and the guilt she felt for trusting Karen. I thought I was doing what was best for my daughter, Clara said, her eyes welling with tears. But I failed to see what was happening right under my nose. No child should ever have to go through what Mia did. Then it was Mia's turn. Clara had been worried about how her daughter would handle being questioned, but Mia surprised everyone with her quiet strength. She said I wasn't good enough for my teddy bear, Maya said, her voice steady but soft. She made me feel like I didn't matter. Karen's lawyer tried to downplay her actions, arguing that she had been under stress and hadn't meant to harm Mia. But the evidence was damning, and the prosecutor didn't let up. The verdict. After several tense days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. We find the defendant guilty on all charges, the foreman announced. Relief washed over Clara as she hugged Mia tightly. Tears streamed down Mrs. Delgado's face as she patted Clara's shoulder. Karen was sentenced to several years in prison, with additional restrictions preventing her from working with children ever again. It was a victory, but Clara knew the journey wasn't over. Healing would take time, and she was determined to support Mia every step of the way. Mia's journey to healing. With Karen out of their lives, Clara focused on creating a safe and nurturing environment for Mia. She enrolled her in a local art therapy program, hoping it would help her express the emotions she struggled to put into words. Mia took to the program immediately. Her drawings, once dark and jagged, began to transform. Bright colors filled her canvases, depicting scenes of happiness and hope. One day, Clara walked into the living room to find Mia working on a large painting. It showed a small figure standing in the rain, reaching out to a bright, glowing figure holding an umbrella. "Who's that?" Clara asked gently. "That's Mrs. Delgado," Maya said with a shy smile. "She's my hero." Clara felt a lump in her throat. "She's all of our hero," she said, hugging Mia. The community rallies. Karen's arrest and conviction had a profound impact on the community. Inspired by Mia's story, neighbors came together to create a network of support for families in need. They organized workshops on how to spot signs of abuse and set up a fund to help single parents like Clara afford quality childcare. Mrs. Delgado became a beloved figure in the neighborhood, her actions serving as a reminder of the power of courage and compassion. "I didn't do anything special," she would often say when people praised her. "I just did what was right." But to Clara and Mia, she had done something extraordinary. Clara's reflection. One evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Clara sat with Mrs. Delgado on the porch. The two women sipped tea as they watched the stars twinkle above. "You've changed our lives," Clara said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you." Mrs. Delgado smiled warmly. "You're stronger than you think, Clara. You've done more for Mia than you realize." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. "I just want her to grow up knowing she's loved and safe." "She already does," Mrs. Delgado said. A new beginning. Months later, Maya stood in front of her art therapy class, holding up her latest painting. It was a vibrant depiction of a sunny day, with children playing under a tree and a figure watching over them with a protective smile. "This is about feeling safe," Mia explained to the group. "Because when you're safe, you can be happy again." The room erupted in applause, and Clara, sitting in the back, wiped away tears. She realized that despite the darkness they had faced, they were finally finding the light. The aftermath of justice. Karen's sentencing had brought a sense of closure, but for Clara and Mia, it marked the beginning of a new chapter rather than the end of their story. The courtroom victory was just one step in their journey to rebuild their lives, and while the neighborhood buzzed with the news of Karen's conviction, Clara knew that healing would take much longer than a legal process. Mia, though visibly happier since Karen's arrest, still carried invisible wounds. At night, she often woke up crying from nightmares, and during the day, she was cautious around strangers, her trust fragile and easily shaken. Clara resolved to do everything in her power to help Maya find peace again. A visit to the therapist. Determined to give Mia the tools she needed to process her trauma, Clara scheduled a meeting with Dr. Annette Gray, a child psychologist highly recommended by Mrs. Delgado. The office was warm and inviting, painted in calming shades of blue with shelves full of toys and books. Mia sat close to Clara, clutching Teddy tightly as Dr. Gray knelt to her eye level. "Hi, Mia," Dr. Gray said softly, her smile gentle. "This is a safe space, and we're going to talk about anything you'd like. But first, would you like to draw a picture or play with some toys?" Mia glanced at Clara for reassurance before nodding. "I like drawing," she said shyly. As Mia began sketching on a piece of paper, Dr. Gray and Clara sat nearby, discussing Maya's experiences and how best to support her. "She's been through a lot," Clara said, her voice tinged with guilt. "I just want her to feel safe again." "She will, in time," Dr. Gray reassured her. "Children are incredibly resilient, especially when they have a strong support system. It's important to let her process her feelings at her own pace." Maya's drawing was simple but poignant, a small girl holding a teddy bear, standing under a dark cloud with a ray of sunshine breaking through. Dr. Gray smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful drawing, Mia. Can you tell me about it?" Mia hesitated, then said, "The cloud is the bad things that happened, but the sunshine is Mommy and Mrs. Delgado." Clara felt her throat tighten as she squeezed Mia's hand. Clara's personal growth. While Mia worked on healing, Clara found herself reflecting on her own journey. The guilt she carried was heavy, but Mrs. Delgado's constant support reminded her that she wasn't alone. One evening, Clara joined a support group for single parents. Sharing her story with others who had faced similar challenges was both cathartic and eye-opening. Being a parent means doing your best with what you have, one woman in the group said. You can't blame yourself for things you didn't know. What matters is how you move forward. Clara took those words to heart. She began setting aside time for self-care, knowing she couldn't pour from an empty cup. She also started attending workshops on child safety and emotional well-being, determined to equip herself with the knowledge to protect and nurture Mia. The neighborhood transformation. Karen's conviction had sparked a wave of change in the community. Inspired by Mia's story, neighbors came together to create a network of trust and vigilance. Mrs. Delgado led the charge, organizing a Community Watch for Kids program. The initiative aimed to ensure that all children in the neighborhood were safe and cared for, with neighbors keeping an eye out for signs of neglect or abuse. At the first meeting, Mrs. Delgado stood before a room full of parents and community members. What happened to Mia was a wake-up call for all of us, she said. We have a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable among us. Together, we can make sure no child falls through the cracks again. Clara was moved by the outpouring of support. She volunteered to help with the program, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Mia finds her voice. Art therapy continued to be a cornerstone of Mia's healing. Over time, her drawings began to tell a story, not just of pain, but of resilience and hope. One day, Mia's art teacher suggested entering her work into a local children's art competition. Clara hesitated at first, worried it might be too much pressure for Mia, but her daughter's enthusiasm convinced her otherwise. At the competition, Mia proudly displayed a painting titled "Kindness Wins." It depicted a small figure offering a hand to another, surrounded by a bright, colorful background. When the judges announced Mia as the winner of her age group, her face lit up with a smile Clara hadn't seen in months. As Mia accepted her award, she turned to the crowd and said, "This painting is about how being kind can make the world better. My mommy and Mrs. Delgado taught me that." The audience erupted in applause, and Clara's heart swelled with pride. Karen's unexpected letter. Months after Karen's sentencing, Clara received a letter in the mail. The return address was a correctional facility. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a handwritten note from Karen. The letter began with an apology, though it was clear Karen struggled to take full responsibility for her actions. "I've had time to think about what happened," Karen wrote. "I know I hurt Mia, and I regret my choices. I hope one day she can forgive me." Clara wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her wanted to dismiss the letter as insincere, but another part recognized that Karen's acknowledgement, however flawed, might be the first step toward her own redemption. She decided not to show the letter to Mia, knowing her daughter's healing process was still ongoing. Instead, Clara tucked it away, unsure if she would ever respond. A bright future. As the months turned into a year, Mia's transformation was remarkable. She had regained her confidence and joy, her days filled with laughter and creativity. Clara watched with pride as Mia flourished, knowing they had both come a long way. Their bond was stronger than ever, forged by the trials they had faced together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mia turned to Clara and said, "Mommy, do you think I could help other kids someday?" "Of course, sweetheart," Clara said, her voice filled with emotion. "You can do anything you set your mind to." Mia smiled. "I want to be like Mrs. Delgado. She helped us when we needed it most." The ripple effect. Mia's story continued to inspire those around her. The Community Watch for Kids program expanded, with neighboring communities adopting similar initiatives. Local news outlets picked up the story, highlighting the power of compassion and vigilance. Mrs. Delgado, though reluctant to take credit, became a local hero. She used the platform to advocate for better protections for children and more resources for single parents. Clara, too, found herself stepping into a leadership role. She began speaking at events, sharing her story to raise awareness about the importance of recognizing and addressing abuse. A new chapter. One day, Clara received a call from Dr. Gray. "Mia has come so far," the psychologist said. "She's a shining example of resilience. I think she's ready to share her story, if she wants to." When Clara asked Mia about it, her daughter's eyes lit up. "You mean I can help other kids?" "Yes, honey," Clara said. "You can show them that things can get better." Mia agreed to participate in a community event where she stood on stage with Clara by her side. As she spoke about her journey, her voice was steady and strong. "Bad things happen sometimes," Maya said. "But with love and kindness, you can find your way back to happiness." The audience gave her a standing ovation, and Clara couldn't have been prouder. A year of transformation. A year had passed since Karen was sentenced, and Clara and Mia's lives had transformed in ways neither could have imagined. What had once been a household filled with tension and fear had blossomed into a sanctuary of warmth and love. But while life had returned to a semblance of normalcy, their journey was far from over. Clara often reflected on how far they had come. The nights of waking up to Mia's nightmares had gradually lessened, replaced by laughter-filled evenings of drawing, storytelling, and planning for the future. The shadow of Karen's actions still lingered, but Clara had vowed to ensure her daughter never felt alone again. But as the anniversary of Karen's sentencing approached, new opportunities and challenges began to emerge, testing the resilience Clara and Mia had worked so hard to rebuild. The power of speaking out. In the months since Mia first spoke at the community event, her story had gained significant attention. The video of her heartfelt speech, shared by attendees and local media, quickly went viral. People from across the country were moved by her bravery and Clara's unwavering support. Messages of encouragement poured in, many from other parents and children who had faced similar struggles. One day, Clara received an email from a national nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting abused children and their families. The organization invited her and Mia to speak at their annual gala, a prestigious event attended by advocates, lawmakers, and survivors. Clara hesitated. While Mia had grown stronger, she worried about the pressure such an event might place on her young daughter. But when she broached the subject, Mia's eyes lit up. "Do you think my story could help other kids?" Maya asked eagerly. "I think it already has," Clara said with a smile. "If you want to do this, I'll be right by your side." Preparing for the big event. As the gala date approached, Clara and Mia worked closely with the nonprofit's team to prepare their speeches. Mia wanted to share her story in her own words, while Clara focused on advocating for better protections for children. During their rehearsals, Maya showed remarkable poise. She spoke about how Mrs. Delgado's courage had changed her life and how the support of her mother and community had helped her heal. "I used to think bad things would never stop happening," Maya said during one practice session. "But now I know that when people care and stand up for what's right, everything can get better." Clara's heart swelled with pride. Her daughter's resilience and wisdom at such a young age were nothing short of extraordinary. The gala, a night to remember. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegantly decorated space. Clara and Mia arrived to a standing ovation, their story already well known among the attendees. Mia's speech was the highlight of the evening. Standing confidently at the podium, she captivated the audience with her heartfelt words. "I was scared," Mia admitted, her voice steady but soft. "I thought no one would believe me. But then someone did, and because of her, I'm not scared anymore. If you see someone who needs help, please don't wait. Be their Mrs. Delgado." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. Clara followed with her own speech, urging lawmakers and community leaders to invest in programs that protect children and support families. By the end of the evening, they had not only raised significant funds for the nonprofit, but also inspired countless attendees to take action in their own communities. Unexpected encounters. After the gala, Clara and Mia mingled with attendees, many of whom shared their admiration and gratitude. Among them was a man who introduced himself as Thomas, a social worker specializing in child advocacy. "Your story is incredible," Thomas said. "I work with families who've been through similar experiences, and it's inspiring to see how you've turned your pain into purpose." Clara smiled. "We couldn't have done it without the support of our community." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I'd love to collaborate with you. Your perspective as a parent could be invaluable in shaping programs for families in crisis." Clara exchanged contact information with Thomas, intrigued by the possibility of turning her experience into meaningful change for others. Karen's parole hearing. Just as Clara and Mia were settling into their new roles as advocates, an unexpected letter arrived. A notice about Karen's upcoming parole hearing. The news stirred a mix of emotions in Clara: anger, anxiety, and a lingering sense of unease. She debated whether to attend. Part of her wanted to confront Karen again, to ensure the system didn't allow her to harm anyone else. But another part feared reopening old wounds, especially for Mia. Ultimately, Clara decided to participate remotely, submitting a victim impact statement that outlined the harm Karen had caused and the ongoing work required for Mia's healing. "Her actions left scars that may never fully heal," Clara wrote. "While we found strength and support, it's crucial that she takes full accountability before being considered for release." The parole board denied Karen's request, citing the severity of her actions and her lack of demonstrated remorse. Clara felt a sense of relief, knowing that justice had been upheld. A legacy of kindness. Back in the neighborhood, the ripple effects of Mia's story continued to grow. The Community Watch for Kids program expanded to neighboring towns, with Mrs. Delgado leading training sessions for volunteers. Mia, now a budding artist, began donating her paintings to local charities, using her talent to raise funds for children in need. Her artwork, filled with themes of hope and kindness, resonated deeply with buyers, many of whom shared their own stories of resilience. Clara, inspired by the connections she had made, joined forces with Thomas to launch a pilot program that provided resources and support to single parents. Their workshops, which covered everything from recognizing signs of abuse to fostering emotional resilience in children, quickly became a lifeline for families in crisis. A heartfelt reunion. One afternoon, Mia surprised Clara by asking to visit Mrs. Delgado. "I want to thank her again," Mia said. "She's the reason we're okay now." Clara smiled and arranged the visit. When they arrived, Mrs. Delgado greeted them with open arms, her eyes misty with emotion. "Mia, you've grown so much," she exclaimed. Mia handed her a small painting, depicting a tree with deep roots and strong branches. "This is for you," she said, "because you're like this tree. You keep everyone safe." Mrs. Delgado hugged Mia tightly. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received," she said, her voice trembling. Looking to the future, as the seasons changed, Clara and Mia continued to build their lives with strength and purpose. Their experiences had not only brought them closer but also given them a mission: to ensure that no other family would have to endure what they had. On the anniversary of Karen's sentencing, Clara and Mia visited a local park where a new playground had been built, funded in part by donations from the gala. As Mia played with other children, Clara sat on a bench, reflecting on how far they had come. A stranger approached her, holding a small child's hand. "Are you Clara?" the woman asked. "Yes," Clara replied, surprised. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said. "I saw your story online, and it gave me the courage to leave a bad situation. My daughter and I are safe now because of you." Tears filled Clara's eyes as she hugged the woman. In that moment, she realized that their journey had created a ripple effect of change far beyond their own lives. The message lives on. Clara and Mia's story became a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the power of community. Through their advocacy work, they inspired countless others to stand up against injustice and to support those in need. As they walked home from the park, hand in hand, Maya looked up at Clara and said, "Mommy, do you think we'll always be okay?" Clara smiled, her heart full of hope. "Yes, sweetheart. As long as we have each other, we'll always be okay." A new mission. Life had finally found a rhythm for Clara and Mia. Their days were filled with laughter, art, and a sense of purpose. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't just theirs. It was part of something bigger. What they had endured, and the transformation that followed, had the power to change lives beyond their own. It started with a single idea during a quiet evening at home. Clara was reading through comments on the video of Mia's speech at the gala. Thousands of people had shared their own stories of resilience, hope, and the fight against injustice. Many mentioned feeling inspired to take action in their own communities. Clara turned to Mia, who was drawing at the kitchen table. "Sweetheart, how would you feel about helping even more kids?" Mia looked up, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "How? What if we started a project to help kids like you, kids who need to feel safe and loved?" Mia's face lit up. "Like a big team of helpers." Clara smiled. "Exactly. We could call it the Kindness Wins Project. What do you think?" Mia grinned. "I think it's perfect." Building the Kindness Wins Project. The idea quickly took shape. Clara reached out to Thomas, the social worker she had met at the gala, as well as Mrs. Delgado and other community leaders. Together, they began outlining the mission and structure of the Kindness Wins Project. Their goal was simple but ambitious: to create a network of resources and support for children and families in crisis. The project would include workshops, counseling services, and community outreach programs, all aimed at fostering safety, resilience, and compassion. Mia played a key role, lending her creativity and perspective to the project. She designed the logo, a colorful tree with outstretched branches, and suggested ways to make the programs more kid-friendly. "We should have an art room," Maya said during one planning meeting. "Sometimes drawing makes it easier to talk about hard stuff." Everyone agreed, and the idea became a cornerstone of the project. The first outreach event. Months of planning culminated in the Kindness Wins Project's first outreach event, a family festival held in the community park. The event featured games, art activities, and informational booths where families could learn about local resources and services. Mia, now a confident advocate, greeted attendees alongside Clara and Mrs. Delgado. She even led an art workshop for children, guiding them through creating drawings that expressed their feelings. As families mingled and shared their stories, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what she had envisioned, a space where people could come together, support one another, and create lasting change. By the end of the day, over 100 families had signed up for Kindness Wins programs, and donations poured in to support future initiatives. Facing new challenges. While the success of the outreach event was encouraging, the project faced its share of challenges. Clara quickly realized that managing a nonprofit was no small feat. There were budgets to balance, staff to recruit, and endless logistics to coordinate. One evening, Clara sat at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of paperwork. She felt overwhelmed and unsure if she could handle the responsibility. Mrs. Delgado, who had stopped by to drop off homemade cookies, noticed Clara's weary expression. "You've taken on a lot," she said gently. "I just want to do this right," Clara admitted. "What if I'm not enough?" Mrs. Delgado placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're more than enough, Clara. You've already proven that. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. Lean on the people who believe in you." Inspired by her words, Clara reached out to Thomas and other team members, delegating tasks and seeking advice. The collaboration strengthened the project, turning it into a well-oiled machine. Unexpected recognition. As the Kindness Wins Project gained momentum, it began to attract national attention. News outlets featured stories about its impact, highlighting Clara and Mia's journey as the heart of the initiative. One day, Clara received an invitation to speak at a conference on child welfare and advocacy. The event was a chance to share their work with a larger audience and connect with other changemakers. Standing on the stage, Clara felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She spoke about the power of community, the importance of listening to children, and the ripple effect of small acts of kindness. Mia taught me that even the smallest spark of hope can light up the darkest places, Clara said. And when we come together as a community, that light becomes unstoppable. The audience gave her a standing ovation, and Clara knew they were making a difference far beyond their neighborhood. Mia's growing role. As Mia grew older, her involvement in the Kindness Wins project deepened. She became a mentor to younger children, sharing her story and encouraging them to express themselves through art. One day, Mia met a boy named Ethan, who reminded her of herself at her lowest point. Ethan was shy and withdrawn, reluctant to participate in activities. Mia sat next to him during an art session, gently coaxing him to draw. "You don't have to make it perfect," she said. "Just draw what you feel." Ethan hesitated, then began sketching a small lonely figure surrounded by dark shades. Mia recognized the emotions in his drawing and shared her own experience. "I used to feel like that too," she said. "But things got better because people cared about me. And now I care about you." Ethan's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, he smiled. A ripple effect. The impact of the Kindness Wins project extended far beyond what Clara and Mia had imagined. Communities across the country began replicating their model, creating similar programs to support children and families. Lawmakers took notice, passing new legislation to strengthen protections for children and fund initiatives like Kindness Wins. Clara was invited to testify before Congress, sharing insights from her experiences as a parent and advocate. As the movement grew, Clara and Mia remained grounded in their original mission. They continued to connect with families, offer support, and share their message of hope and resilience. A celebration of kindness. On the second anniversary of the Kindness Wins project's founding, Clara and Mia hosted a celebration at the community park. The event brought together families, advocates, and supporters from near and far. Mia, now a teenager, gave a speech that left everyone in awe. "I used to think I was just one little person who couldn't make a difference," she said. "But my mom and Mrs. Delgado showed me that when people care and work together, they can change the world. That's what Kindness Wins is all about." The crowd erupted in applause, and Clara felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. Looking ahead. As the sun set over the park, Clara and Mia sat together on a picnic blanket, watching the joyful scene around them. "Do you think we'll ever run out of ways to help people?" Mia asked. "Never," Clara said with a smile. "There will always be more to do. But as long as we keep trying, we'll keep making a difference." Mia nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Then let's keep going." The legacy lives on. Clara and Mia's story became a beacon of hope for countless others. Through their resilience, courage, and commitment to kindness, they proved that even the darkest experiences could lead to light and transformation. Their legacy was not just in the lives they touched, but in the movement they inspired, a movement that showed the world the power of love, community, and the simple but profound belief that kindness always wins.